Hey guys, it's Mitch. How's it going? We're taking a look today at a comic that's a bit of a visual masterpiece. We're taking a look today at Gen13 Wired #1 by Richard Bennett and Mike Heisler. Mike Heisler is credited as the writer on this, but the writing is completely inconsequential. This is just a vehicle for Richard Bennett to go absolutely nuts with the artwork. So, just before we get into it, if you enjoy the channel, if you feel like you might want to help out a little bit, go subscribe to my Patreon. Links are in the description. Gives you early access to everything I do, helps out the channel, helps to buy new comics. So, Richard Bennett was not a guy I was familiar with at all before I started making these videos. I started getting acquainted with his stuff on Wildcats, where he would fill in for Jim Lee, essentially. Because Jim Lee was doing his whole studio approach where he would do breakdowns for pages and then get his buddies to finish them off for him. That had worked well for him in the past on things like Uncanny X-Men and I suppose regular X-Men, when he'd gotten guys like Scott Williams, Will Portasio, and Art Thibert to finish off his work for him. And when reviewing Wildcats, it got kind of disappointing when I'd see Richard Bennett's name pop up, because I knew, okay, that just meant this is going to be some watered down Jim Lee with a guy who can't quite do the finishes. Which, I mean, is, I think, kind of fair. At the time, anyway. I think Richard Bennett really didn't have the chops to keep up with Jim Lee, which is a tough task in itself. It's not even anything on Richard Bennett to say, yeah, man, you don't draw Jim Lee pages as well as Jim Lee does. But Brass kind of opened my eyes a little bit. There's some difficulty with the finishing on Brass here and there, particularly on the figures, like from the figure construction to the hanging drapery to the shading to the rendering, really, just every aspect of it. The page design, though, is something else. It struck me that Richard Bennett was a guy who was very creative when it came to page design and very detail-oriented. Loved to sit on a page and just noodle, probably way past what would have been acceptable for a monthly schedule. So there's actually very few completely Richard Bennett comics out there that I'm aware of, because there's no way he was going to be able to produce work regularly. But every once in a while, you get one of these special edition things that Richard Bennett just was allowed to go nuts on. And that's kind of what we've got here. So why don't we just get right into it? We can start with the cover. That's a friggin' wild start. It's difficult to even tell what's going on to an extent. We've got what I assume is the Rainmaker character. I mean, you know, the costume, obviously, although the face doesn't seem quite right. And just a ridiculous amount of tech hanging off of her. Richard Bennett seemed to be pretty tech obsessed around this time. Like Brass was that kind of book where it's guys running around in like Gundams and shit. And he's got a little bit of that Dave Johnson kind of thing where he's able to just come up with interesting little shapes and textures that just seem to work right. Like I love this spinal column thing that's hanging down off the back of her here. The other thing you're probably going to notice on this is a whole lot of computer coloring, which is going to be apparent throughout the book. This is 1999. This is the age of liquid and just, you know, slathering the comic art in computer colors. It's not as intrusive in this one as it would be in some other books, at least. So, we're going to start off in late 19th century America, where the United States Army is launching a surprise attack on a tribe of peaceful Native Americans, which is an odd decision to start off a Gen 13 image comic book with, but it's certainly fine. There's nothing super crazy going on here, except maybe for there being no real panel border between this image and this one. Most of the panel border is basically this cloud of smoke here, which doesn't even really seem like that much of a panel border once you get the computer coloring in there. And you like the Dutch angle. Odd decision to put like just a little triangular panel in here, which is going to be transitioning us to the next part. So this is basically the Rainmaker character in Gen 13, and she's on the anniversary of the attack in the Trail of Tears, which follows right after it. She's basically just kind of communing. She's enriching herself and her culture, that kind of thing. And we can see that Richard Bennett has taken a few steps in terms of page design. Like this gigantic shot of Rainmaker here is pretty wild, takes up a whole lot of real estate. And he's obviously worked a fair bit on his figure work. I'm not 100% sold on the finish on some of this. Like, you know, the inking can get a little bit too fine for me. And we'll kind of see it throughout the comic. But, I mean, for the most part, yeah, he's pretty skilled as an inker. But it's the design, really, that stands out to me. And the amount of detail. Like there is a ton, like apart from the figures here, There's a ton of detail in the background, just all these rock formations. So I guess this is in Utah. And we've got these smaller panels down here with other people just on like travel trailers. Like, because this is an anniversary, it's kind of a media event, so all sorts of people are getting into to also commune with the culture, I suppose, but also to make it a bit of a tourist trap, maybe. And from there, we cut to some weird tech on a dude. This is actually John Lynch, who is trying to get in touch with Rainmaker here. But yeah, wild double page splash opening. And we're going to continue. So here we find out that Rainmaker is actually in some sort of holodeck. She's using it as, she can't actually get to the reservation for the anniversary, but this is as good as she can get, and it's close enough for the kind of commuting she wants to do. So once Lynch shows up, she stops the program and goes to do something with the tech. I can't tell exactly what she's doing, but when she does, all sorts of weird Matrix-y type digital stuff happens to her hand. And Lynch is very shocked, although Rainmaker wonders what the big fuss is. So really not a ton going on these pages, and that's the story of this book. The writing itself is not the focus. The focus is Richard Bennett is just going to have a good time coming up with some crazy looking stuff. You can see here we've got Rainmaker crossing over into like at least 4 different panels here. Lynch only gets 3 because he's not the focus of the simulation, I suppose. But like crossing over herself multiple times. It's nutty looking stuff. And, you know, just, again, it looks like it looks like she's standing on the machine she's reaching into later on here. And we can also see that Richard Bennett isn't happy with just coming up with naturalistic poses or even stereotypical superhero poses. He wants to come up with some weird kind of Renaissance-y, twisted kind of stuff. Really bending the figures. I mean, particularly the female figures, but, you know, even like Lynch here is bent back pretty far. And yeah, it is actually Matrix type stuff that we're seeing here. This is right around the time that the first Matrix movie came out. So it's a little surprising that they've already seen it, but I mean, that's definitely Matrix glyphs in the background there. And one other thing to note again is the tech. Richard Bennett just loves drawing tech, just noodling it. And he's really good at it too. I mean, judging by Brass, the guy reads a lot of manga. So I mean, that's a great source, particularly in the 90s, for learning how to draw tech that not a lot of other people in North America draw at that time, I don't think. So once she turns off the simulation, it just kind of turns into like a regular old rec room. Nicely perspective rec room, by the looks of it here. And she still has no idea what he's even talking about with the digital stuff. So Lynch has to decide that he was probably seeing things, probably because of those weird goggles he was wearing or something. Heads off to the kitchen and finds Grunge, just a couple shirtless dudes hanging out in the kitchen. So maybe David Dakota had a hand in writing this thing. Grunge has changed a little bit from his original look. I mean, for one thing, he's kind of slimmed down from the look J. Scott Campbell gave him, but he's also cut his hair and grown it out. And I believe he was meant to be Asian originally. So Richard Bennett's going to make an attempt to make him look more Asian. So good for him for that. It's not always something people think to do in the 90s. And he's making something in the microwave, and he gets it out by just shifting his mass through the screen of the microwave. Apparently that's what he usually does. Only this time, with Lynch watching, he gets more of that weird techno stuff going up his arm, which Grunge doesn't react to. And Lynch has to just wonder what the hell is going on, and, you know, probably not imagining things at this point. But as he goes to leave, the Matrix glyphs show up in Grunge's eyes as well. So he cuts back through the rec room where Fairchild is lounging around reading a book. As he walks up the stairs, though, the rec room transforms into a jungle, which I believe is reminiscent of a Gen 13 cover, maybe like number 6 or something? I think it's number 5. And he catches something out of the corner of his eye, looks back, and she's changed back. So something weird is going on in this place. Goes into the laundry room and confronts their robot housemaid, I guess. I guess they have that at this point. You know, there's, like I said, nothing's going on in this story other than weird dream sequency kind of stuff. Like this is like the episode of TNG where Data keeps having weird dreams. And, you know, it's just like senseless. But fun to draw, I guess. You know, Richard Bennett is going nuts. He's coming up with difficult perspectives on this stuff. And then, you know, the shot of Fairchild here, that's some nice figure work. Kind of twisting the figure up, doing it even more so here, where he cuts back. and she's crossing over into multiple different panels here. Very nice. I feel like we're getting close to like Mark Beecham territory, actually, with some of these shots of these women. It's kind of impressive, and particularly from a guy like Richard Bennett, who's had difficulty with figure drawing in the past. It's like he really worked on it. All the stuff in the background, all the detail, all the good perspective stuff going on. I feel like Richard Bennett's had a handle on that for a while, although the perspective even before had, it got a little janky from time to time, and he's really kind of locked it down now. Also, his eye for detail has not slowed down as he draws every single fucking leaf in this little jungle panel here. I got one panel with a jungle in it. I'm going to make sure I get an issue's worth of leaves out of that thing. So the robot housemaid doesn't respond, and he pulls up her face. Looks like half of her face has been burnt off. That's crazy looking and gross, and I love it. Very good. And Burnout's here, and apparently he has done this, and doesn't really say why. It's just he's getting rebellious or something. And then he kind of attacks Lynch, and his plasma bursts hurt him in a way that Lynch isn't familiar with. I don't particularly care what's going on in terms of the story. It's just these pages are insane. Like this one here, you need the word balloons to guide you through it, because if you tried to match up word balloons with any other heads apart from this one, you completely lose track of what was going on. But this is a great page design. This one's even better, with the huge lunging Lynch here. That's fantastic, and I hope I remember this shot so that I can steal it. Also, framing Burnout rather nicely here. And, of course, anytime there's any hint of tech, it's going to be all of the tech. The background here, like this did not need to be here. This isn't even an attempt at a double page spread. It just kind of feels like it a little bit because the tech here kind of merges with this. I don't even think that was an intention. It's just if you draw too much tech on all of the backgrounds, all of a sudden they all start to merge a little bit. And also, great shadowing. The dramatic stuff here, like not quite naturalistic for how a shadow would go, but it still looks nice. Down here, maybe a little better in terms of actually capturing what shadow does. And oh my God, I don't even know. Lynch wakes up in some kind of pod with all of the Gen 13 people sort of around him here. I think, well, I'm not sure if Grunge is in here or not, but the rest of them seem to be. I suppose that's probably Grunge. But yeah, we get the end of the confrontation with Lynch and Burnout, and he kind of swoons back and wakes up. And this is so wild. Like just determined to cross over into every single other panel. Massive figure. And again, from a guy who has previously had figure drawing issues in the past. Like to just go ahead and throw a figure across 2 pages here and get it looking pretty fluid. The perspective here is weird. I'm not sure exactly what's going on. I guess this is maybe a platform that ends like around here, and then we get a lower part of the laboratory. All this stuff back here, this is like a monitor showing the dream that Lynch was having. And I guess it doesn't help too much that Freefall can like fly or something. But between the massive figures and the really imaginative page designs that I honestly didn't previously know he was capable of, and the insane attention to detail on everything, like this is kind of turning out to be like a little bit of a masterpiece, really. I don't know if Richard Bennett ever completed any comics again after this. I get the feeling probably not. He moved into the film industry sometime in the early 2000s. And I mean, he probably did some inking jobs after this. I think this may be the last time Richard Bennett penciled, though. And it's, on the one hand, it's a shame. On the other hand, like, man, thank God he got this out before he stopped. So they're kind of explaining this pod that Lynch has been stuck in. It still seems a little bit dreamy, though, in that everyone's just kind of insisting that Lynch go along with whatever's happening. And they're just kind of kidding around and ignoring him. More crazy stuff with the page designs. Like these panels here are pretty great. This actually reminds me a little bit of what J. Scott Campbell was doing earlier with Gen 13. Another Mark Beecham looking shot of Fairchild crossing over into multiple panels, just making sure that you see that Beecham-esque ass. It's like, all right, if you're going to draw a Mark Beecham ass, I am paying attention. And so anyway, they make their way up to some sort of bridge. So they're on some crazy looking Richard Bennett ship that doesn't look like anything else I've really seen around this time. And it turns out they're flying towards a gravity well, and Grunge is just kind of piloting it right in there, doesn't seem too worried. Again, seems kind of dreamlike. Like, look at these panel borders. What is this? Why did it have to come up here? But we're just, we're swirling around because this is not reality. But the ship is wild, the tech is wild, the page is just blowing my mind. I could do without the CG stuff in the background, but it's 1999, and you just can't avoid that in comics, like not big comics around this time. It does make me wonder how big this issue was actually saying that, because this feels like the kind of work that should be recognized as a singular piece. It's the kind of thing I would expect to go online and find a Reddit thread about, but I don't think there's anything out there. Anyway, this is where we completely forsake reality. So they go into the gravity well, and everyone's just kind of going, hey, Lynch, cut loose, stop being so literal. And we get all sorts of crazy visuals here from, like, people in cat suits. I don't think that's meant to be Catwoman specifically, but people in all sorts of weird bondage shit. I don't even know if that's referencing anything or if that's just what Richard Bennett felt like drawing that day. Again, Rainmaker being as large as possible, like larger than if you just stood her straight up and down. You put her on a diagonal, you can stretch those legs a little bit further. All of a sudden, Fairchild and Lynch are like dressed up like tourists, and Lynch has a gigantic Mickey Mouse hand. I don't even know what that could possibly be doing. Then he's at a rave, and one of the guys who's running the rave is Lynch's son, and he's so proud. Except at that point, IO helicopters show up and start raiding the place. Like, it's degenerated into complete nonsense. But that's okay so long as we keep getting crazy page designs. Oh, I think we'll be okay, guys. Lynch climbs up into one of the helicopters. I don't see why you do this panel border, but yeah, sure, man, go for it. He confronts the pilot, and apparently they were on the lookout for him. But it's like, that's okay, bud. We're going back to IO headquarters. So that's where is it a helicopter still? It might have changed. I don't know. It could be that. No, that could be still that same design. And honestly, at this point, I trust Richard Bennett to keep it fairly consistent. So now Lynch is going to sneak into IO headquarters. The background stuff here doesn't count so much. Like, this one's okay. At least we got some neat perspective stuff going on. Most of this, though, is CG stuff, so I don't really count it. This one, we can go ham on, because he put all sorts of instrumentation here in the cockpit, trying to make it look nice and realistic, like, give it that verisimilitude. All sorts of textures and rivets and decals along the canopy. Great looking stuff. Like, honestly, after this page, like, yeah, okay, you can take this one off, I think, because you still put the detail in on the ship, and you still went a little crazy with the design. So he makes it into, I guess, the head office at IO, where he comes across some dude who looks like he's straight out of Battle Angel Alita. I wonder if that's one of the animes that Richard Bennett's reading around this time. It is out, and it is damn good. So yeah, man, find some references by all means. And the page design starts to settle down at this point. We've been going all free flow up until now, and it's right when he goes inside that it just kind of solidifies. So I think that's a stylistic choice. More CG backgrounds. Again, you can't complain at this point. It's like if he drew everything in the background, the thing probably would have taken years, and he might not even have finished it. Look at the design on this guy. You got his rib cage and his shoulder blade here. I assume that's a shoulder blade. Mixed with all the tech. There's so much detail in everything. And this freaking gun with the eyeball sights. Oh shit! Island Zero! No, we're not done. It looked like we were done with those ads, but no, we are not done yet. So he recognizes this guy. This guy's name is Panic. He should not be in here. Panic tells him to calm down. Lynch says, I will not, sir, thank you. Blows his brains out. Again, more crazy panels. Why not, I guess, eh? Why stick with a box? Great looking shadow on John Lynch here with the realization. That's absolutely fantastic. And shooting Panic does something that brings John Lynch out of this newest dream with another CG effect. And at this point, it's like 1994 Richard Bennett takes over again. Because all of a sudden, yeah, this figure isn't very good. These ones are okay. The faces are kind of iffy, but I wonder if just at this point he's run out of steam. It could be the case. And Panic is here along with the Gen 13 people, but this is, I believe, reality at this point. So he did get stuck in this hologram program that I believe we started the issue with. So he went into the holodeck thing and got in a little too deep. The goggles were messing with his brain. The weird wiring and digital stuff that he was seeing earlier in the issue was apparently Panic, who was protecting the other Gen 13 members. So that was him like seeping into the code and trying to keep them from getting corrupted, but he couldn't, I guess, go after Lynch, or he prioritized, something like that. And now I feel like we're trying to explain what Richard Bennett's trying to draw, where like, wait a minute, we said, Panic, that you were never allowed inside this place, and he goes to check him, turns out he's a hologram. Then it's like, well, wait a minute, if he's a hologram, how is he protecting us in the system? Unless when the receptor goggles probed our minds, they caused some kind of feedback loop in the program that created an image of Panic from our memories and keeping in character, it protected us from itself. Those are all words, almost certainly in English. And they just decide, you know what, gang? Today sucked. We're just going to forget about it and go get some ice cream. And we end with something that maybe carries over into the series, where he says he's going to hide inside of Anna, which is the robot maid. So it feels like Panic here himself is maybe a program, like he doesn't have a physical body anymore. That might be the case. But that's where the issue ends. That is absolutely bonkers. I cannot remember seeing an artist who, like, I was so disappointed in seeing his name before. And then by the time we get to this, it's like, oh boy, it's Richard Bennett time. And he went way beyond what I expected he would be capable of. The only shame really is that the Richard Bennett era of like quality work, like, you know, like he's always been like a quality inker at least, but just where he was putting out like really interesting pencil work, it's so short. Like it's brass and it's this, and I think that might be the entire sum of it. Like, you know, he does have all those other fill-in pencil jobs on other works, but it's not very good stuff. Yeah, so I mean, we will keep going through brass. I've got issue 2 now, and I'm going to keep my eye out for issue 3. So that we can throw that in at some point as well. So we can at least enjoy every single issue that Richard Bennett did the pencils and inks on when he was in full flower. Why does that sound inappropriate? Anyway, that's going to do it for this one. Thanks very much for watching. If you like this video, please hit like, hit subscribe, hit the notifications so you know when the next one's coming out. Go over and subscribe to my Patreon. It gives you early access to everything I do, from the Blood Force stuff to the YouTube videos before they get uploaded to YouTube, as well as some Patreon exclusive content. You can also follow me on Instagram and DM me there for commissions, and you can join the Blood Force Discord server. But yeah, that's going to do it. Thanks again for watching, guys. I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.